Hi, my name is Dillon Bhatt, and I am the co-founder of Millwood Kane International and the head of international business development. I'm also the founder and CEO of Lux Forte Limited, based in the UK. I'm from the Global Jewelry and Watches Committee, but from the London chapter. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the latest in luxury timepieces and how tech innovation and style has impacted that over the past few years. So, what is the worth of today's luxury timepieces in the current generation? It's really interesting because, as far back as you can remember, watches were always used to tell time. Today, I think that's very, very different. It is now used, one, as a status symbol. It is now used to kind of convey your emotions, whether that be, personal style, etiquette, taste in, finer things in life, and also to kind of tell a story. So I'll touch a little bit on those three things and kind of how they differ from previous generations. Today I have multiple watches, and I always love to wear a watch on my wrist because I kind of feel a connection to the mechanical and aesthetic parts of the watch. However, do I really use my watch to tell the time? No, I use my iPhone. I'll look at my phone multiple times a day, and I'll get the time from there. But having said that, I glance at my watch probably no less than 100 to 300 times a day. And what am I looking at? I'm looking at the journey that the watch has taken me through. So a watch is something that sees everything you see. It goes with you everywhere you go, and it kind of convey your story to the rest of the world. There's a lot of emotion in watches. You have the mechanical movements that are there. In some cases, you can see that on the dial. In other cases, they're kind of hidden away, and you have to turn the watch around. And each of them have their own uniqueness, and I think it's really, really interesting to see kind of how that is now communicated to the rest of your peers. In a lot of circumstances, people come up to me and say, "Wow, that's such an interesting watch. Can you tell me more about it?" And being so passionate about watches, I can dive deep into kind of what makes this watch unique and different, and why it's so important that I like to wear it, and I'd love to share that message. So I think there's definitely a point where watches become a conversation starter, and it really allows you to connect to a fantastic community of watch lovers around the world that share the same passion and the same depth and breadth of knowledge about this kind of new hobby. So I think we've moved away from what watches were typically, which were kind of tools, to being so much more than that. Watches are all about emotions. So the progress of timepiece mechanics aesthetics is equally of importance. Yes, absolutely. There's two different kind of thought processes. One, what makes a watch unique? Is it the fact that it's made with extremely rare materials? Does it have gem settings? Does it have a really interesting movement behind it? Or in a lot of cases, the watches come with a lot of provenance. And I think for a collector, all of these different attributes that the watch may have play different roles in different watches. So certain watches come with quartz movements. You put a battery in, and even some of the larger watch manufacturers known for some of the high-end watch manufacturing and horology use quartz movements, namely Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet, and some of the jewelry watches like Bulgari, Piaget, and so forth. So you have that section of watches, typically more women-led watches, more of the highly design-related watches. Then you have the pure mechanical watches. So that could come with either a automatic movement, a hand-wound movement, and multiple other complications are then added to watches. So for instance, you might find a watch such as this Rolex GMT. The Rolex GMT is a watch that has two time zones. So it can tell you your current local time, but then also the time in another geographical time zone. So I'm currently using this to I'm in London right now, but I'm also using it to tell me the time in Cyprus. So I can use both of those time zones at the same time. That is called a complication. Complications vary, so you might have another complication, which is a chronograph. A chronograph allows you to use the watch more so than just tell the time. It allows you to track and start and stop like a stopwatch. So in that case, that would be considered another complication. Complications move into a variety of things. So you might have minute repeaters. Minute repeaters tell you the time audibly, but completely mechanically. So you would pull a spring lever, it would ring a dong, and it would sound the time to the wearer. So there are a variety of different complications, and like I said previously, they all mean different things to different collectors. Moving on from that, provenance is such an important thing in the world of watches. So a watch could be worth X amount to a specific person and Y to another consumer, and the reason for that is who had owned that watch before. If a watch was owned by a specific person, a celebrity or a person of interest, that watch may be worth a lot more to the general public. For instance, we have seen Paul Newman's Rolex Paul Newman Daytona fetch incredible amounts of money in auction because it was his watch and broke all wristwatch records. So in that case, the provenance was extremely strong. He was so integral to the success of that model, and today Paul Newman's own watch, whoever currently owns that watch, is sitting on a sizable investment into a specific wristwatch. So provenance is extremely important. Understanding who the current owner is, who the previous owner, and what the lifespan of that watch has gone through adds a lot of value. So what is the importance of innovation in watchmaking? So typically, the Swiss watch industry has been one of the slowest moving in terms of innovation, industries out there. They're not so open to adopting technology, not so open to bridging the gap between generations. And I think this is changing currently. Innovation sits very differently in the luxury watch space because they have to protect the brand's identity, they have to protect the consumer, and of course they have to protect the intricacies and the development of research into creating these mechanical movements. A skill that takes a watchmaker anywhere from 10 to 15, 20 years to master that craft. We're talking about highly intricate pieces of metal that are then crafted in such a beautiful way to create artworks for the wrist. So innovation happens relatively slowly, but what we are seeing in today's day and age is a variety of different innovations, and they all come, all brands take that to their own and adopt them in different ways. So we've seen the adoption of blockchain technology into the watch industry, and what's interesting is that blockchain allows you to have a transparent playing ground for consumers. So the majority of people looking to enter this collecting journey have a few options of where they could purchase the watch from. One would be through a retail store, one would be through an online boutique, for instance, and surprisingly, a large market of the amount of watches sold happen on the secondary marketplaces. That could include eBay, that could include second-hand dealers, watch specialists, auction houses. All these are considered to be on the secondary marketplace. And what is so important is previously what I mentioned about provenance, understanding who the previous owner is. Is your watch authentic? Does it include all the box and the documentation that's supposed to be going along with it in order for your watch to retain value? And where the blockchain is extremely integral to this kind of development, it's how we can bridge that gap with transparency, how we can bridge that gap with provenance, and how does that enter this new luxury space. So as we're seeing now, we're able to buy a watch on the secondary marketplace that then attaches a digital twin to it that tracks the provenance of the watch. And what that's so important is that it can reduce the amount of fakes, it can give the consumer additional peace of mind, and allows you to have a deeper connection with the brand themselves. They finally can bridge that gap between the consumer and the brand. In many cases, the brand doesn't know the consumer and the consumer doesn't know the brand. There is always a retailer or a distributor or somebody in that middle and not allowing that connection to happen. So we're bridging the gap in that space. Additional innovation we might see is more of a sustainable approach to creating watches. This could come through a variety of new materials. For instance, recycled gold is becoming extremely used in jewelry, and I think we'll see that in the watch space soon. For instance, conductors and semiconductors, they use gold because they're a great conducting metal. So what we'll see is taking previously used gold and then putting that into luxury timepieces. We're already seeing lab-grown diamonds enter the settings of watches. So Tag Heuer have now finally released the first watch to use a lab-grown diamond. This is an extremely sustainable process. We don't need to have mines anymore. It doesn't have the issues that typically you might face with understanding the provenance and history of where that diamond previously came from. For instance, unethical diamonds. It really does give an ethical, sustainable approach to watchmaking. And how do I see luxury timepieces in the future? So for a very niche section, they will still retain the mechanical aspects of it. So like I previously mentioned, the fine art and craft that goes into creating these wonderful timepieces. So whilst we have seen a influx of smartwatches around the world, I think for the high-end luxury timepieces, it doesn't necessarily affect that market. In fact, I think luxury timepieces are now moving to a younger consumer, a younger demographic, and that may have had a large impact due to the amount of people that are wearing smartwatches. You're now able to get the feeling of wearing a timepiece on your wrist, and then once you've had a smartwatch, you might want to then expand your collection into mechanical watches in the future. So for definitely a younger generation, we're seeing the collector become more and more well-versed in the world of timepieces and collecting and perhaps even investing into timepieces. So we're going to see more and more younger people entering the space. The demand is going to continue to outstrip the supply. And this is a very exciting time for the industry. The fact that they can be used as tradable assets and store of wealth is extremely important, and people are more versed on this, and this is because of social media and blogs and just that interaction between the brands and themselves today. The access of information is far deeper today than it has ever been, and I think people are more educated. So it's going to be an extremely interesting 20 years ahead of us in the watch space. So I think there's a lot of takeaways from as a consumer, as a watch collector, as an advisor to brands, and we need to be wary of technology, but we need to embrace it, whether that be blockchain and the metaverse and so forth, or using new materials. Things are moving faster than ever in today's day and age, and we need to really embrace it because we don't want to get left behind. Whilst we're a very traditional industry, it's very important to learn from our consumers, understand what they are looking for, understand what they want, and then kind of use that to the advantage of the industry. So I've been collecting watches for over 12 years and I've had a lot of takeaways. Primarily, the most important thing that I've taken away from my collecting journey has to communicate my wants and my needs. And I think that's extremely important. We've seen that a lot of people are buying watches today to make a quick profit because they're trading substantially above market value. And I think what's important is to build that relationship with, your authorized retailers, and explain to them, I want to buy a watch because it's my son's graduation, or I want to buy a watch because it's my 25th wedding anniversary. And I think it's important that you share the experiences that make you human. And at the end of the day, people buy people. So if you wish to buy a watch in today's market, which is extremely difficult, unfortunately, you can't just go to most boutiques and buy a watch because the demand has completely outweighed the supply. It's always interesting, and it's always important to explain to them, your thought process as to why you wish to own a certain piece. So definitely be open to having that conversation, be human, and be candid with people. I think it's extremely important. So I would like to thank the whole of the DLC team, and of course Mr. Jimmy Mistry, for creating such a wonderful platform where we can all share our thoughts and experiences. So thank you very much.